Welcome to another edition of the channel's Mailbag. So what is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is the part of the channel that you guys actually control. It's based on comments, questions, general feedback that you guys leave either on the YouTube channel, the website, or through one of my social media feeds. Mailbag contains what I think the answer is, what I think my view of the comment is, or sometimes, I just throw it out to the wider audience and say, what do you guys think? That's what Mailbag is. So let's get in to the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Now this one I think is a little bit long. Yeah. And it's from Mr. Darley, and it's in respect of Does the World Need Kronos 3, an SMR I did in February 2025. It's quite an involved answer. Mr. Darley writes, it also may be very well that that if they should remove some of the restrictions, like the amount of banks, and add new features, that it would make it difficult to make it fully backwards compatible with older Kronos versions. They most likely want to avoid it making it complete new firmware for both old and new versions, as it, in my eyes, looks like they want to keep the old and new versions fully interchangeable, so old customers can get new sample sounds, and you can fully make setup copies between the K1, KX, K2 at home and new K3 for gigging. Well, the Kronos 2 and I believe the lower Kronos, the original and Kronos X are compatible of 64-bit operations. There is something in the makeup of the system that restricts the instrument just 32-bit operation. Now, I don't know quite where that is. I think it's well, I'm not going to say where I think it is. Now, whether the Korg Kronos 3 with the new hardware components is fully capable of 64-bit operation, I am not sure. I suspect it is if it's new components. But as you say, at the moment, the idea of maintaining multiple firmware versions for older and newer platforms might not be palatable to Korg, especially if you think that the Korg Kronos 3 has a limited shelf life. But, as I say, like many others, I believe this is a holding pattern. I believe it's there to stop Korg hemorrhaging musicians to other platforms that they might never win back. One of the things about the Kronos is it has such a loyal has had such a loyal fan user base that people just, it's like, you bought into the montage, you want to use the montage. You've bought into Kronos, you want to use the Kronos. Roland, I haven't quite seen, or people I know aren't quite as loyal in the same way as people on these two particular instruments. But I could be wrong on that. Anyway, Mr. Darley writes back and it says it isn't updated to 64-bit as what was shown, which is kind of a letdown. It isn't really hard to build a Linux system for 64-bit instead of 32-bit. It's literally just a / command in the build file when you build the kernel. All motherboard versions of the different Korg Kronos models is standard x86 boards that fully support 64-bit OSs. Having access to only 3 gig of memory in a modern synth is horrible. Even Korg streaming of samples is generations ahead of e.g. NI Contact. It's still a major bottleneck in having many big sound packs installed at the same time. But I hope Korg ups the support a bit now and at least finishes what they were doing just prior to the discontinuation of the K2. They made a 64-bit Mac version of the VST plugin for managing sounds, but they forgot to make a PC version. And as everyone knows, 32-bit plugins was removed several versions ago of Cubase from the Cubase platform for stability reasons. So PC people are stuck with running it through a 32-bit wrapper if you want to keep the old 32-bit plugins. They need to start listening to the community. They just threw the Kronos out there 14 years ago and never really did any kind of serious update support on the system, apart from mainly bug fixes like e.g. upgrading the rather anarchic UI of working with user samples, creating key zones, etc. I only remember seeing one update which has the add in the fast split function in program mode, but I joined when K2 was released, so there'd been few smaller updates earlier. Korg kind of promised possible new engines to the Oasis system in the future. The few they made were added with the release of Kronos, and nothing new since. They were front runners back then, but I guess they just dropped the ball when the VST became the industry standard with Cubase. That's what I'm kind of disappointed with Korg about. Oasis open open architecture synthesis system. Well, not much open about it really, is it? Sadly. Now, my friend who is a Linux engineer, and he's a very, he does quite a lot of stuff he's not really allowed to talk about, and he really knows his apples and pears. Has pretty much said the same thing when he looked at my Korg Kronos 2, because as far as he was concerned, it was a great keyboard. Then he started, what's going on underneath the bonnet. That's all he really cared about. And he's done the same with the Oasis. He looked at the Oasis, and then he was kind of looking at the kernel, because I was saying I might have trouble with something. And what he said is, yes, it's fully capable of putting a 64-bit operating system on it. Yes, you could take what you've got and put it up to 64-bit. But he also caveated the comment there was something stopping them from making the switch from 32-bit to 64-bit operating system. Now, whether it's hardware or specific library config, maybe someone that is more into compiling world would confirm this to me. Yes, the Oasis was killed long before it was ready to be removed from the market. However, the feedback I've always had on the Oasis from mates in the industry was it was a fab concept, but only a small percentage could afford the price tag of the Oasis. Now remember that when the Oasis was put into the market, it was retailing at $8,000. Okay, and it's still, if you want an 88 key in good working order, you are still going to pay the better part of $2,000 and a bit, if not more, for a good working copy of the Oasis. Now, because of that, price tag, they couldn't hit the musicians they were trying to hit, and therefore, in order to sort of get a more wider buy-in to the platform, they killed it in favour of the cheaper Kronos platform. And the Kronos was significantly more cheaper. So the Oasis came in at $8,000 and something or other. The Kronos, the 88 key Kronos, brand new, was about $3,500 to $3,500. So a considerable difference, and it also meant it became within the reach of musicians who wanted that kind of instrument. So as soon as they dropped the price tag and introduced the Kronos, the units flew off the shelves. They weren't selling Oasises, but they were selling Kronos. But as you say, the issue is that Korg really haven't done much with the core platform since they launched the Kronos. There is an argument to say, what did they need to do to the platform? What things needed to be added to the platform that weren't already there, as opposed to, updating. So yes, they could put more engines in. But most of the upgrades to the platform are not around the software. The upgrades to the platform are around the sound banks that you can buy and apply to the platform. So that's kind of where they've kind of concentrated their efforts, is, making it so that you can buy a sound bank from a company and Korg retail a number. There's a number of other companies that, like in the old days where you used to go and buy cards and discs from various companies, where you can go and buy sound packs from these companies. Some are generally supported by Korg and some are not. But that is where I think the effort has gone in on Kronos, not the actual core operating system, but actually the sound banks that you can apply to the system for specific purposes. In terms of the Cubase stuff, now I don't use Cubase. My friend Gary does. He's a profanic user of Cubase. I used to use Cubase before I swapped to the Mac, and I've been on the Mac platform for over 10 years now. So my kind of knowledge of Cubase is a bit jaded into sort of the annals of time. And while PCs have continued to support 32 bits environments, even though the operating system on a computer on a PC is now 64-bit, Apple actually physically removed that capability from the platform about since I've been living here, so within the last 5 years. So you can no longer run a 32-bit operating 32-bit plug-in VST piece of software driver on your Mac, because it's just there's no support for it at all. It has to be 64-bit or nothing. So that's the reason why I think Korg rewrote the stuff for the Mac, because they had no choice. If they were going to continue to support the platform, they had to continue to support. They had to rewrite it so it made it compatible with Mac. And if you go and look in the music community, I would say it's probably, well, I don't know now. I mean, I would have quite confidently said it was kind of 60-40 Mac PC, but what it is now, I don't know, actually, if I'm brutally honest. But the points that you've raised here are kind of really well argued. And then Mr. Darley comes back and says, it was in my opinion that if Korg had opened up early for the third-party development, the Oasis might have fared better than it did against other softwares, systems like Steinberg's VST, that really started to slowly, all the way back to Cubase from version 2 for the Atari ST. About the Kronos 1 and 2, Korg have stated that all of the audio calculation is done on the Atom processor. There is an ARM processor on board, but I believe that it primarily handles the display and probably some of the buttons and controller logic. The Oasis used several Motorola 56K chips for audio, which was the cause of the high cost. The Pentium 2 problem probably only ran the OS. Yeah. And the only thing that I'm not sure is if it's because their Linux kernel is real time, if that plays a role in it not being 64-bit. This is also why Linux is often used for OS for newer synths running on e.g. ARM. So far as I'm aware, you cannot get an RT version, e.g. of Windows, and not off the shelf. Real-time kernels are often used in the automotive and robotics industries because of the lower I/O latency compared with normal multi-threaded OSs. Now, again, this is another valid point around Oasis, which is a number of people have said that the whole kind of open system synthesis architecture, which was what Oasis was really built for, didn't really come to fruition because other developers didn't develop for it. Now, I think the reason why other developers didn't develop engines for it wasn't to do with the fact they couldn't develop engines to it and Korg didn't release the code. I think it was more the price tag of the platform. If you've only got a very small number of units in the market, are you going to spend time developing for it? But if you've got a lot of units in the market, then you're going to spend time developing for it. And the way that Korg have done with Kronos, which is packs that you can install on Kronos 1, you can install on Kronos 2, and you can install on Kronos 3, and packs you can install on Kronos 3, you can install on Kronos 2, and can install on Kronos 1, means that you've got a very, very wide, diverse market using Kronos 2 or using Kronos. Going back to the sort of kind of whole real-term Linux kernels, in my last job, we had real-time Linux kernels on the operational technology side of the business. So that's how the operational technology is is the technology that sort of runs kind of the machinery, if you like. Now, we ran Red Hat, which is a flavour of Linux. Many have commented that the flavour of Linux that runs on the Kronos and the Oasis is a Red Hat Fedora hybrid, and it's been heavily customised for the job it does. Now, I'm not a Linux engineer, so I'm only going what other people have told me, but there's an interesting blogger called Kronos Hacker that has undertaken a lot of research into the way Kronos has been put together and how he potentially could upgrade the motherboard. Now, the interesting thing is that he's posted, there is a website, if you go look at Kronos Hacker up, and you'll find his website, and he talks quite a lot about, you know, all this stuff that he's done, hacking the kernel, hacking this and hacking that to make things work. And it requires quite an in-depth knowledge of how the Linux kernel works to allow him to do that. But he has got newer motherboards running on the Kronos too, and you know, made everything compatible, which I sort of kind of advocate for him. But it's still running 32-bit. It's not running 64-bit, which was the interesting part about it. You know, it is looking at the whole sort of package about, you know, people sort of argue about, should it be 64-bit, should it be 32-bit, should they be doing more, should you be able to put new motherboards in? You know, the thing about this is when you're running computers and all this sort of stuff, you know, the ability to upgrade is kind of limited by the platform sometimes, and limited by the OS, and limited by the drivers that are available for the platform. And if you can't get all of those in sync, or you're not skilled enough to write your own version of the drivers and some software extensions, then you're kind of relying on the manufacturer to do it for you. And I'm not skilled enough to do that, so kind of I have to sit within the manufacturer's realm and say, this is what the manufacturer supports, this is how it all hangs together, and this is what you get. So where is the Kronos platform going? And this was kind of, you know, I'm kind of paraphrasing sort of from, you know, what has been said here. And Korg, as always, remain really, really tight-lipped on what's going on in terms of their platform development. The bottom line is there is something new coming. We just don't know what it is. So in terms of porting old code, using 32-bit code, I dare say that the 32-bit limitations that are there on K2 are there because there's a reason. And I dare say that they could probably put K3 up to 64-bit operation, but then would break all the backwards compatibility. And I'm going to kind of leave this there. The conversation went on for a bit longer, but that was kind of the crux of everything that was said in this conversation around Kronos 3.